Welcome, viewers, to another episode of My First Job, the podcast, where we document career journeys across the spectrum. Every week, we talk to a new guest on how their careers evolved, what was the inspiration, and how they navigated through the career in their life. My name is Venugopal, and I am the CEO of Ideascape Communications. Today, we have a person who's used his voice to build his career. Sounds unusual? It is. Just in case you thought that singing was the only way to make your voice the center of your life, it turns out that voicing everything from documentaries to learning material to ads is a profession in itself. I have the pleasure of welcoming an old friend and classmate, Joseph Thomas, who has built his own niche in voice recording. And I'd love to bring him on the show. Good afternoon, Joseph. A real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So, you mentioned, Joseph, that a friend or classmate told you that your voice sounded good on the microphone. And that was one of the starting points. When was this? In which year was this?
Okay.
Was it in school, early in school?
You want the long answer?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll give you an answer midway. So the year was
Okay.
1974, and I think we were in the ninth standard in a convent school in Pune, where I grew up. And it so happened that at the age of 14 or so, in the ninth standard, as I said, I was acting in a Shakespeare's play for the prize distribution ceremony, the Parents' Day function in the school. And I finished my part. I was wearing the Shakespeare's costume, the green satin outfit, and the feathered cap, and so on. And I finished my part, and I had a sigh of relief. And I came into the wings, and the principal, a priest, father, he caught me by the scruff of my satin green costume. And he said, "Joseph Thomas, go and compare the show." And I was taken aback, taken by surprise. And I said, "Father, I have not prepared anything." He said, "Go quickly. The original compere is vomiting. He is not well. And you go and do it. Parents are waiting." So I was full of trepidation. I said, "Father, I don't know what to say." He said, "Go." I said, "Okay, Father, I look like a clown. I shall go and change into my uniform and come back." And he said, "There's no time." And he pushed me onto the stage. And I said something. And the next day, I felt like running away from the town. But I came back. I braved the storm. And I was waiting for my friends to actually take me apart. But one of my friends, whom you know, when I asked him, yesterday I made a bit of a fool of myself, he said one line which still rings in my mind to this day. And he said, "Your voice sounds great on a microphone." And that's when I realized that something has been given to me by the Almighty. And since that day, I've had that at the back of my mind. And I've tried to do something with that voice. That's the story.
Wow. So you were literally pushed into your career, unlike some people who have to navigate and then experiment and try and find this whole thing. So, what is the next stage? How did you go about? You obviously graduated, and then so what happened in between? Were you taking assignments from time to time?
All right. That's a very good question. So what happened was, while this episode took place around the age of 14, as I had mentioned a couple of times already, when I was about 17, not quite 18, in the month of August, the month of August of 1978, with this line ringing in my ears for the last few years, I found my way to the Film and Television Institute of India, wearing a tie and a suit boot and all those things. And not quite 18, I walked in there
Okay.
and I said, "I'd like to do some assignment where I can use my voice." Now, in those days, Venu, late 70s, there was a film director's course which used to be conducted at the FTII. And as part of the
Right.
film director's course, we had a 1 hour capsule which the candidate, the direction course candidate, had to make ready at the end of the term. Within those 60-minute capsule, a 10-minute section was devoted to the English news. So one of those
Okay.
students who was a part of that course, he said, why don't you read the 10-minute news for us? And that's how it started. I got 75 rupees in 1978 for reading a 10-minute news. And as they say, I'm still doing stuff.
So when you read the news for the first time, you were obviously pitchforked into the situation. In school, you were pitchforked into that situation. But here you had a little more time to prepare. So what was it that went through your mind when you were reading? Is it something that you were already quite comfortable with? Reading stuff and having to do it because you had
Yes.
your diction was right, your knowledge of the language was fine. So it came to you a little easier?
I had absolutely no clue about diction or grammar or language because we
Okay.
just sort of blustered through life in that space of time. However, I had one distinct
Okay.
advantage, and I, again thank the Almighty for the presence of my older sister. Her name was Neeta. She passed away. So she used to be a Doordarshan Delhi and Bombay newsreader. So her name was Neeta
Okay.
Thomas in those days. And she was pretty good, being from the St. Joseph's Girls High School, the convent next to our school in Pune. She actually went into this news reading and journalism line. So there's an interesting story, if I may be permitted to share it with all of you all.
Please.
When I was about 9 or 10 years old, one evening when my parents were not in the house, she said, come here, I will read a story to you before you sleep. 9 or 10 years, mind you. And she read out from a book, a story written by Leo Tolstoy, way back in
Okay.
the late 1800s. And the name of the story was Where Love Is, God Is. It's a wonderful story. And the way she read it,
Okay.
I was completely hooked. She had such wonderful nuances of explaining every syllable, every word. It was a fabulous experience for a 9-year-old boy. And that, I think, is where the spark of you doing something in my life using the spoken word or spoken aloud word, that is where I sort of leaned back to say that I have a role model inside my own house. Let's see. So it came fairly easily and naturally to me to read the news at 17 years and 11 months. That's the background.
Okay. So this went in as part of the students' capsule. And there, of course, like you said, you were asked to do it. But how did you then move on to uh, actually getting assignments? Did you visit various studios? Did you leave samples of your work, of your, voice?
I
How did you
think,
go about it?
yes, Venu, to this day, I feel, to this day, almost 40, 50 years later, I still feel that's the only way to get around and get yourself into the market if you want to make some money or make a name for yourself or make a career for yourself. You have to peddle your wares, as it were. So those were the
Yeah.
days of the audio cassette, if you remember. So I got a few
Yeah.
samples of voice done, and I went to all possible places where people would be able to give me work. One of those institutions was situated within the University of Pune campus, and that organization, that institute was called EMRC, the Education
Okay.
Media Research Center. So they were making a lot of educational programs. So I dropped a few cassettes there, met a few people. They threw me out initially, and they directed me to another organization next door within the campus, which was the University Grants Commission office.
Oh,
And if
okay.
you remember, we used to have in Doordarshan in the afternoons, maybe 2, 3
Yeah.
o'clock, small school children, some programs. So I got an
Right.
opportunity to voice some of those in those days. So
Okay.
the answer to your question is yes. You do the hard yards, wear out your shoe soles, and you keep going from place to place, checking if work is available. Only way.
Yeah. But the amazing thing is that you persisted with it, and because you liked doing it, right? It was something that came naturally to you.
Yes, and all through this journey, I had my colleagues, classmates, friends. I went to college, did a BSc degree, and did a couple of MBAs and all that. But throughout this career, people used to say, "You sound good. You sound good." So I got spoiled. I got conditioned by other people, and I tried to, I think, use that to my advantage over my life so far.
Okay. No, I think that's a very important affirmation, because once you have that coming to you from various sources, then there are two choices. One is that you accept it and decide that you want to make a career. But did you at any point think that you needed to move to Bombay or Delhi, because that's where most of the film and production work was happening?
Yes, yes, quite right. In fact, at the risk of throwing humility out of the window, many people said the same thing to me, that you should be in Bombay with your kind of talent, etc., etc. So in the early 90s, I did go to Bombay and I did a lot of work in Bombay. And then I realized when I read an article about me in one of the magazines that Joseph appears to be the kind of professional who would rather be a big fish in a small pond rather than the other way around. So I said, hey, this makes sense to me. So I stopped going to Bombay and I concentrated on doing work from Pune. And today, of course, the situation, Venu, is wonderful. You can record in the comfort of your air-conditioned bedroom and send the wave file, the voice file across to Las Vegas within the blink of an eye. So
Yeah. Yeah.
no need to go out.
That's one of the major changes which has happened, which we'll come to. But when you said you did the hard yards, you went and got yourself, you acquainted yourself with several studios so that the recorders knew that there was a talent available, because invariably they are the people who put you on and then say that, okay, here's a great voice, why don't you try them out? And that's how clients normally get introduced to people. But I'm also quite, it's quite unusual for to go into government organizations and then see what are the options available there. Because I don't think too many people look at that as an option, because that's one thing that builds a portfolio
Yes,
and
I did a bit of,
increases your
I did
network.
a bit of, I had the good fortune of doing a bit of research on this, and I realized they were making programs by the dozens. So I said, if
Okay,
not one, a whole lot of programs, I could get one or two and then showcase my talent with the private
right,
sector, and that helped.
right.
On the contrary, I was stuck with the government projects for a very long time in the early part of my career. Volume
Okay,
editors
so
used to
you
do
were, huh, no, please tell me.
we
Yeah,
do entire lessons which lasted about 58, 59 minutes in one continuous
wow.
shot. Today, of course, you want to record a 20-second ad, you many artists will probably have many takes, etc. We didn't have that luxury of having many optional takes. It was one long take very often.
That's it's quite a, what do you say, to be able to retain your concentration, because I think only someone who's read something for anything more than a couple of minutes will understand how easy it is to stumble over commas and paragraphs and sentences, because the emphasis in a particular sentence, where do you put it, how do you manage to retain that cadence right through? That's not an
Okay,
easy
so
job.
let's do a simple exercise. Can I do that? I'll
Yeah,
read
please.
something on my laptop screen right now, and I'll read two
Okay,
sentences which actually refer to my sister and her inspiring ways when I was a little kid. Would that be okay?
wonderful.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I'm going to read
wonderful.
straight off. So a normal person would probably read it like this. My sister Nita, without ever meaning to be so, was an inspiration. A woman of many talents which have been eulogized by her family, friends, colleagues, and associates in later pages. This is part of a book. To me, she epitomized the vivaciousness of life itself. She, along with my parents and teachers, have largely been responsible for the development of my own personality, and I sincerely thank them for all this. Now, this is the way a normal person would probably read this
Yeah,
section.
yeah.
But a voiceover artist would probably put in a little more, and it might sound like this. My sister Nita, without ever meaning to be so, was an inspiration. A woman of many talents, which have been eulogized by her family, friends, colleagues, and associates in later pages. To me, she epitomized the vivaciousness of life itself. She, along with my parents and teachers, have largely been responsible for the development of my own personality, and I sincerely thank them all for this. So I hope there's a difference.
Of course, there's a difference. It's like you've changed character altogether.
That's why
I'm glad
people
you
call me.
did that because anyone who sort of listens to the podcast will say, but the voice sounds normal. But then you're able to project it. So, how did this come naturally to you?
Um, I would say yes, because from an early age I was interested in theater and things to do with the voice and so
Right.
on. Uh, to tell you the brutal truth, when I put on a set of headphones and I listen to something on it, I just go into the zone, some different realm of
Okay.
existence. So
Okay.
the faculty of hearing and the faculty of speech or sound, to me, it resonates in a different fashion from most other people. But it's possible for everyone
Okay.
to get this, not an issue.
But I'm so glad you did that comparison, Joseph, because I think that's the point at which people understand that it's not just reading out something or going deeper into it.
In fact,
It's literally as
let me,
if you changed character. You became a different person.
there was an interesting other example which I'd like to share here.
Huh.
I'm going to
Yeah.
do the extempo, not read it off any screen. There was an ad for
Okay.
a parody of a James Bond film, and I had to do the
Right.
promo, like the
Okay.
guy called Don LaFontaine in America. God
Okay.
bless his soul, by the age of 69. So he was the trailer voice, the voice of God. So
Yeah.
there was a James Bond spoof, and it went a bit like this: when the countdown to the next century begins, it's good to know there's one number you can count on: 007, Bond, James Bond. I hope that was different too.
Yeah. It was different. And so
So
you
you've
did
got to
this
modify.
as part of a, yeah. You did this as part of a, sorry, I didn't get the exact context that you were talking of. That
It
was
was a
this was
parody
for
presentation of
parody.
James Bond.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great fun.
it I think it worked really well to get the entire set of people who were listening onto that. So
It's acting the voice. Yeah.
yeah, that is, which is where I think it's not just a voiceover. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Okay. So we were on this. You were telling me about how the difference between voicing and actually performing with your voice, simply reading versus performing with your voice, the acting part.
Therein lies the difference between dubbing and voice acting, because dubbing is nothing but putting a voice to the character, and mimicry is another area which people confuse with the voiceover industry. So dubbing,
Yeah,
have we lost you again? Are you there?
yeah, I'm here. I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay, great. So slight difference between mimicry, dubbing, and voiceovers. So I am not active in the first two mentioned items. I only do what is called voiceovers for documentaries, corporate films, advertisements, as you gave the list earlier in the session just now. So that is my
Right.
area of work. I don't do the film star mimicry. Some people might say, जाओ पहले उस आदमी का साइन लेकर आओ जिसने मेरे बाप से साइन लिया था. I don't do that kind of work.
Even though you can, you obviously can, but you, any particular reason why you didn't, why you
Yeah,
decided that this is going to be your way ahead and not the
yes.
dubbing or, ah,
Yes, I have one reason for which will answer two different questions. One is I did not get into that area because I feel there are wonderfully far more talented guys who can do that work much better than me. So they should get their rosy roti and work, etc. And second is, during the pandemic, a lot of voice artists started opening home studios, recording at home, and sending the files and so on. Uh, Many people have started their own studios, even professionally, voiceover artists, that is. But I never did that because whatever I am, over the last 3-4 decades, it's because people from studios have been calling me for work. The sound engineer, the sound designer, the owner of the studio, the agency. So after having given me their support for 20, 30 years, if I set up my own, I felt that that was kicking them in the stomach. And that's not me. So I never really went into the line of starting my studio and recording for other people and so on. So the answer is that I respect other people and their right to a living, and I don't want to be the one to deprive them of that.
Okay. Okay. But so the only case in which you say you will do it is when you get some of the foreign assignments, or you still prefer to go into a studio and then just upload the
I
audio from there?
never record at home. Never. I always record
Okay.
in a professional studio after hiring it.
Okay.
Because I'm not
Okay.
a sound recordist. I do not know the intricacies of how they process the sound. Well, I do to some extent, but I cannot do it
Right.
myself to their level of expertise. So I would prefer that
Right.
the expert does the job. I might be the person doing the narration or the voiceover, but he's the guy who will process the sound and send it, and it'll sound like Kabir Bedi, Amitabh Bachchan, and Don LaFontaine all rolled into one. But
Yeah.
if
No, that's
viewers are
a ve-
they must listen to Don
yeah.
LaFontaine's mashup on YouTube. It's amazing. Don LaFontaine mashup trailer. It's something else.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the so what do you do to keep your voice afresh? Is there some special care that you take? What are the exercise? You said you mentioned that pranayama and Brahmavidya are some of the things that you are exploring.
Right, right.
So, huh,
Good question. So, while there is no standard prescription that you do these 5 things and your voice will be great, there is no such thing. In fact, I believe that all one really needs to be a good voiceover artist or any professional for that matter is a good attitude. And by attitude, I mean, I can break it down into 4 sections. By attitude, I mean good thoughts, good speech, good words, good feelings, and good actions. A combination of this is good attitude. So if you're going to criticize what's happening in the Middle East, if you're going to criticize the lack of progress in a country, or you're going to criticize the weather, or that our team did not do well, so what you're putting out is a poor attitude. What you get back in return is going to be something which you're not going to be happy with. So I believe to be a good voiceover artist, you've got to be in love with the craft. You've got to love the paper or the script or the sound engineer or the studio or the fact that you have to travel 15 kilometers to go for the recording. You've got to be in love with those activities. So when you project and portray love, you do a great job. And that's the prerequisite for being a good professional. The remaining things are synthetic, like you shouldn't maybe have too much of chili food before a recording, or maybe too many ice creams before a recording. But these are all
right.
synthetic. Even if you do have say, chili food and ice cream before a recording, if you have your attitude in place, then you will always do a great job. That's what I believe.
Okay. So you've built these relationships, Joseph, over the last 30 years of all the studios. What are the changes that you see on the studio front? How do you how have they built, because I remember one particular guy telling me that earlier he could invest and then take 8 to 10 years to recover the money on recording equipment, but now it changes almost by the year. You have to upgrade, you have to get yourself a new thing. So how have you seen the business change?
Yes, I've seen a lot of Titanic sinking in my time. People invest a few 25 lakhs in a small studio 10, 15 years ago. Technology changes, a lot of things change. The nature of the business has changed. Many people start recording by themselves in their own houses. So, yes, it did take a hit for some time. But I believe this is also an opportunity. You can give your voice for a far larger spectrum of programs now. For example, recently I did an audio book for an astrologer. Now, the audiobook market has been around for some time, but it's relatively new. It wasn't there 20 years ago. So
Right.
things like audiobooks are a huge chunk of work. One audiobook will take an artist maybe a month to complete. So if the guy says we have a series on motivational books and there are 100 books to narrate, his career is going to be devoted to that one project. So the opportunity is great. We just have to look for those opportunities. But I've been spoiled,
Okay.
I've been completely spoiled. I like to do the short commando kind of recordings. Go into a studio at 10 a.m., walk out of the studio at 10:30, and the rest of the day you can devote to your family or your other passions.
You're right. And the experience of, yeah, you're right. If it's a 30-second or that's the good thing about corporate films. They don't go over 5 to 7 minutes. So most of the time, once you're done with that, and it's pretty standard because you can't deviate, you can't go very heavily off from one particular, though you can bring character into it depending on how the script is written and how each one of those things. But have you felt at any point that, you know I explore something else? Or you have obviously experimented with the script writing, and you actually do training and all of these things, but they have been
Uh,
more about, not anymore.
no, in fact, I was going to contradict you at the risk of affecting our friendship. I didn't just experiment. I've done something like 1,000 scripts in the last few years. So I'm a script writer to
1000.
1,000.
Wow.
So effectively,
Wow.
let me bring different complexion into our dialogue. Can't call it a
Okay.
discussion, no? Just purpose.
Yeah.
So I do a voiceovers, training, coaching, script writing. I'm a graphologist. I analyze handwriting commercially
Okay.
for the industry. Uh, and I buy property. So I'm a landlord. So when I'm sleeping, the money is coming to the bank. And some people have asked me that, okay, so how did you do it? So I've become a consultant on money management now.
Okay.
How to get money into your bank when you're sleeping. So yeah, I do a number of things. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But all of these facets, they're all passions, interests that developed over time? Or it happened that a client asked you, okay, I'm going to do a film. How did all the assignments on, how did script writing get included as part of your portfolio, or graphology? There must have been stories that started each of these things off.
Yes, absolutely. So story number one.
Huh.
Here comes the one about
Huh.
script writing. So
Okay.
there's an unfortunate story in the marketplace regarding me and script writing and voiceovers jointly. So whenever I get a script, I go through it and I check for errors, grammatic errors, syntax errors, punctuation errors, etc. And for the first 25, 30 years of my career, I realized that I have not been able to receive a flawless script, one which there contains no errors at all. So I used to correct it and do the narration, and everyone's happy. So the story in the marketplace is that if somebody gives me a flawless script with zero errors, zero
Right.
parts per million going wrong, then I'll do it free of cost. I still have got that money budget with me.
Yeah,
So the thing
that's
is,
going to
the
be
language
hard to.
skill of
Yeah.
is leaves much to be desired. That's the problem.
Okay.
People don't write language anymore, English or any other language. And the second story is regarding graphology. I decided to learn because I thought I had a flair for it. I studied the subject and I made some comments to some people about their handwriting. And one thing
Okay.
led to another. I said, what you're saying is quite accurate. Why don't you do it professionally? We'll pay you. And I studied it formally and I got myself certified, etc. And I then help people like the Pune police, because things like suicides notes, etc. These things need a
Whoa.
graphology intervention, and things can get simpler. So I had an interesting case where,
How do you figure out what exactly happens since you've learned it professionally? Can you
okay,
go a
I'll
little deeper into that?
sure,
Yeah.
sure. I'll give you a simple example. Suppose person A has very large handwriting, person B has very tiny handwriting. Who do you think, Venu, being a layperson, I am guessing, has got the more trusting personality? Person A or person B?
I would think the large one because it's somehow.
Okay. Second example, one
Huh.
person, for example, person number one, his handwriting slants towards the right as you write. We are going to
Okay.
be considering India, so the writing is from left to right. So it's
Yeah.
slanting from left to right towards the place you are writing to. The second person,
Right.
person number two, his writing or her writing slants towards the left. Now, question is, as a layperson, who do you think is more forward looking, person one or person two?
Again, I'll go by convention because most normal handwriting, I think, tends to slope towards the right and not the left
Okay,
because it's almost as if it's inclined in the other direction.
correct. So, without having done a certificate or a diploma course in graphology, you've got both answers correctly.
Okay.
Therefore, leading you to conclude that there is something about the personality which can be read from the handwriting. So you go deeper into these aspects, then you can actually come out with the personality of the people. I had once given a character, a personality assessment of a potential bride to the potential groom, and they didn't get married based on what I said.
Okay.
So they were gunning for me after that.
Okay. That should have been the meeting to beat all meetings. But what were they doing examining handwriting? Did they feel that that was one of the aspects that would define the character?
Actually, yes. What happened was that I had actually put up a stall in an exhibition for graphology, not for the voice
Okay.
artist line. And this couple came along with their family members, and I was doing my thing as a graphologist. And they said, "What about us? Can you read our signatures and handwriting?" Which I did. And that's what led to this fiasco. And they pursued me for months later, saying, "My God, you broke up our marriage and this and that." But
Oh,
anyway, the
God.
point is, a lot of things are possible as a graphologist. But yeah,
Yeah.
voice
But now in a world where handwriting is almost, we've reached a point where children who once they're out of school, they're not reading anymore, they're not writing. Essentially,
correct,
handwriting is it's become very hard to kind of figure out. But
correct,
it's a
correct,
wonderful sort of throwback to how that cursive that we were taught actually helps to define character. But since you talked to me about the police and helping them, when you were examining a suicide note, you would look for some signs of disturbance. The handwriting would give that
okay.
away, or you would see that, or
Yes,
you
yes,
knew something about what was happening.
yes. So the answer to that is very simple, very, very simple. When one looks at a suicide note, one can understand, especially if one has a comparison of the deceased person's handwriting from the past. A
Okay.
genuine note which has been penned by the person who is deceased or
Ah,
allegedly having committed suicide. So one can
okay.
compare the two and actually conclude whether the suicide note was indeed written by the deceased person. Sometimes it
Okay.
may not be written by that.
Oh, yeah.
Second,
Yeah.
the personality traits which one can conclude, one can decipher from a handwriting, from a handwritten note, can also lead one to the conclusion whether this person has got suicidal tendencies or not.
Okay.
So there are very famous cases, especially in Bollywood, where suspicions have been cast and things haven't been solved yet. So hopefully they'll get a graphologist in if there is such evidence available.
Yeah.
There's another area which
Really
is
good.
very interesting, Venu. I'd like to touch upon that,
Sure.
and that is again in the realm of graphology. I'll give you an example. Just imagine that there is a very large, let's say, IT company, and there is a
Yeah.
vacancy for a vice president finance or a general manager finance, a very senior finance professional. You're from the field, so you'll resonate with what I'm saying. Now, the typical method is to post the vacancy on some portals, get some responses, sift it down, call 7, 8, 10 people for an interview, have the personal interview, and then maybe make a final offer, etc., etc. Now, how is this relevant to a graphologist? Now, what I do with large companies is that I give them a request saying that, okay, you've sifted down to your final 8 candidates. Is it possible for you all to give me a handwritten short sample of each of those 8 candidates? What I will do with those 8 separate samples is that I will fix a personality of the individual to the requirements of the role, because of my background in industry and the corporate world where I spend some time, I have some rudimentary knowledge of the job requirements. For example, a general manager finance needs to have an eye for detail, has to good with numbers, and does not need to be gregarious and over friendly. He needs to have a very minute view of life and so on and so forth, among other
Yeah.
characteristics. So what I do is these eight samples, I can look at them and perhaps tell the director or the CFO or the head of the company that out of these eight, these five do not fit the personality traits of that job. You eliminate that. You can interview these three and maybe take the next step after that. The advantage to
Wow.
everyone, it's a win-win for everyone, is that I help the top management who's going to do the final interview save them 5 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours of company interviewing time, and they hone it down to a better marriage between the candidate and the job. And if I charge them a reasonable sum of money, everyone is happy because I'm giving them some expertise which they have no knowledge about. So I'm honing it down
Okay.
through the fun. That's the deal.
Wow, that's a completely tangential career move. This is not something that I knew. I mean, I think you have told me about it, but I'm glad we've dwelt on it a lot more during the course of this
I can see the
conversation.
bubble over your head, That's material for the next podcast.
Okay, how did the training come about? What is the background story there?
So, simple again. I finished my MBA in marketing, and I finished another MBA, in fact, in finance the year later, and then joined this company called Modi Xerox. It used to be a copier
Okay.
manufacturing company,
Yeah.
and joined them as a salesperson, wore the tie and the white shirt, and carried the briefcase and tried to sell copying machines, the original Xerox copiers, because Xerox is the name of the
Right.
company,
Right.
not just the process. So I worked there, and then I moved into training in a few years' time, and I really enjoyed that role. I loved that. I was passionate about training. I like the feeling of standing in front of people and talking. But now, of course, things have zoomed ahead, literally, pun
Right.
intended. And having done my
Yeah.
I said, okay, why not? So I set up my own training company, etc. And I do a lot of training even today on various things like quality systems. I worked with CII, that's Confederation of Indian Industry, as a quality
Right.
consultant, ISO training, lead assessor program, those kind of things. So all these forays into various careers, various knowledge pools have helped me as a voiceover artist. Because if I get a script about technology, I'm comfortable. I get a script
Yeah.
about the weather and environment, I'm comfortable. I get a script about human beings or animals, I'm comfortable. So I'm really very grateful that I've been exposed to so many different areas of knowledge. I would, in fact, say I've been singularly fortunate.
It's amazing how you found, you've been multifaceted while looking at one as your core, but you've lived life on your terms. If I was to say, okay, what is your career? And we could have talked about your career as a graphologist for the whole, we could have talked about your career as a training guy for the whole session. But because voiceovers is where we started, and we've had, we've worked together on a few projects on those as well. Though I wish that, I had that you had recorded this from a studio, because then I think people would have got the full import of what you're saying. Because it, at this particular point, I think only because the connection is a little patchy, I'm not sure that they would have got the, uh, especially the difference. That really was brought home to me when you read out that passage. I think so much more would have come out if I had thought of this earlier. Anyway, that's probably food for
Next
another
time.
session, because yeah, next time as they do it. So, is it that you took life as it came, or did you uh, decide that there were certain things that you needed to sort of figure out, or at different points in time you said that, or you were willing to plunge into things to see where it led?
Uh, I'd answer that with a peep back into my past again. I come from a defense background. My father was in the army, so there was a
Okay.
certain amount of maybe courage or ability to face the odds, come what may. We'll get through this, and take on the unseen, the unexperienced. So I never felt that whatever life threw at me, I always felt that I could handle it, whatever it was. So I was just happy that all these doors opened up to me, and along the way I was able to help a few people. So overall I feel that while I've been very fortunate, I've also been exposed to some secrets of life, as they say. Like Rhonda Byrne had
Yeah.
written the book The Secret and had the movie The Secret. So all these things
Right.
have really helped. So I feel one should, well, take life as it comes and do the right thing as far as possible, and be positive all the time, etc., etc. So I feel I've been very, very fortunate overall.
Yeah. But it's one thing to be fortunate, it's another thing to be able to decide or decipher, in your case, almost like somebody spoke into your ears and told you what you're good at. I don't think a lot of people have that, either the good fortune of having someone identify what they're good at, because in your case, it was very obvious. But in certain cases, the what do you say, ability of the person may not be clear to begin with. For example, a person who organizes things, an organizer, that is, who manages to network with a whole lot of people and conduct an event where they think of all the things that can go wrong and take care of it. Now, that is not an ability that you have, because you've never done it. And invariably, you learn it because you've joined someone, and then at some point you had to do it, and then you understood the importance of. So there are, I think, a lot of professions where what you're good at is not obvious to people. It's not even obvious to you. So I think some of these come almost by trial and error. In your case, it's been more, it's almost as if you knew the end goal, and then you had some charming diversions into graphology, into training and script writing, because you were already good at it. And because it was like a satellite around your profession of voice recording, it helped you tap into those opportunities a lot better, which is wonderful. I mean, I'm saying you said 4,000 scripts. That is the kind of scripts you've done.
4,000 voiceovers, 1,000 scripts.
Voiceovers. Okay, scripts you've done close to 1,000 at least, I'm sure, because a whole lot of clients I know sometimes say they want a film, but they're not very sure about what they'd like to do. They have a broad idea in mind. But did you enjoy writing the script as well?
Oh, yes. Especially because I did not know that I could write. I thought I was a pretty poor
Okay.
writer. I don't remember
Okay.
getting 8 or 9 out of 10 in the essays in the English class in school. But I felt that people were lapping up what I was writing in terms of a film, corporate film script. So I said, why not offer this as a service also? So that's how that happened.
Okay. Okay. Terrific. So, based on what your career has been about, Joseph, what is it that, how do you think this profession is going to change with the coming of AI? Now that
Mm.
you have, artificially generated voices, what is your take?
Yes, I think one, it was not unexpected because change is inevitable. But I feel that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Let me repeat that. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Which means
Change.
if we are looking at AI as a competitor, then it will definitely be a competitor and we'll be out of a job in no time at all. But if we feel that the AI is going to just augment and give us a little more opportunity to become better as human voices, then maybe AI will not have such a threat to this industry. I am beginning to look at this whole thing from the second point of view. I'm very positive about this because the kind of synthetic nature or feel one gets listening to an AI voice, I don't think it can really replicate the warmth of a human voice with all the love, affection, friendship, camaraderie which comes through. So, in terms of modulation, pace, etc., there are a lot of undesirable elements in an AI voice. So, I don't think it's going to be a threat. It will be very useful in terms of visuals, visual appeal, and so on. But for the voice artist
Yeah.
who's really good, not a problem.
Yeah, I at least okay, these are the early experiments, and I noticed that to begin with, it was very flat. But then you have to program every aspect of it. So it's always within a range. So if I want a sad voice, then I will give three or four notations of sadness and then train the voice on that. And then say, okay, I
Correct.
want a voice that's just cheerful. But then it never really, that effortless switching that human voices can make.
I think what is lacking in this area, this new area, is the human intelligence, the intervention of the human intelligence. It will end up sounding like the railway platform by and large, all across India.
Yeah. And you can
So,
see that even with uh, Google's $1 billion money spent on maps, the person who's reading out, the voice that is reading out, because there is so, it's such a huge challenge to try and get uh, the name of the place right, the directions to make it sound warm, except of course they say you arrived, which is about the one thing that they got right. But the rest of it,
correct.
I agree, it's a humongous challenge. It's not a simple thing. What you spoke about is the perfect example. In a railway station, it sounds really disjointed. It sounds, it's just make do. You
In
sort of,
fact, as we speak, Venu, I am jostling between two different scripts. Both have come to me with a comment from the agency saying this was done by the AI voice earlier. The client is not happy. We need to redo this. So there you go. It's an opportunity. It's not a threat.
okay, wow, wonderful. So, what is it that, let's say anyone getting into this? So, your first job, I've never asked you about your first job. It was Modi Xerox, I think. Now, when you said that you
My
passed
first
out of
job was
NTA,
washing cars at 30 rupees a month in 1972.
wow.
True, true story. I washed
Okay.
cars at 30 rupees a month. But yeah,
How did you? I mean, you decided that this is one way you could earn pocket money. What was your? Yeah, wonderful.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly
okay,
that.
and
During
and
the
30 rupees would go a long way in making sure that you could catch your
oh,
films
oh, yeah,
and whatever else they want to go
that
out. At that point
taught
in the
me the
80s was
yeah, the 30 rupees was a premium rate in those days. The other guys were trying their hand at it. Very few did in 1972. But I believe
okay,
that that's when I learned if you want to do something, do it really well. Otherwise, don't do it at all. So I was washing cars
okay.
in the entire society that time.
Wow, wow.
But
That's
yeah,
a great way to. I mean, you got your physical exercise. You built relationships with the people who you were doing it with, and obviously you came at it from a completely different angle.
true.
Okay, so if somebody, if a child or a young person you didn't know or you didn't know much about came to you and said, how should I plan my career,
Hmm.
what would your response be?
Career in which career are we talking about?
I
Voiceovers?
mean, they're looking at how do I figure out which career I'm good at, or
Oh,
like in your case, it's someone who told you that your voice was good. In their case, they're not sure about what they're good at.
well, I'm going to make it very, very difficult for the youngster of today. What I would recommend is they take a device because they can't do any writing anymore. Just make a list of all the various options which they want to consider and see what resonates with them. Do an aptitude test maybe and of course talk to their peers, their parents, their friends, colleagues. But at the end of the day, listen to that little voice inside. I think that is critical. People are listening to everyone else except themselves, and that's the danger.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Because it's almost as if at that point people are just examining one thing: how can I get into either a career that's happening or a career that pays me a good starting salary, even if what I do is immaterial.
Correct. Even if you look at the voiceover industry, I mean, the celebrities charge a larger amount of money, the newcomer gets less money, and there's a full range in between. So people will ask, how much does that celebrity charge for a voiceover? How many years will it take me to get there? So their focus is on what they can get out of the profession,
Yeah,
not on
Chad.
what they
Yeah,
can give to the profession. So that
yeah,
attitude, change of perspective is required to make a success of anything, not just voiceovers.
yeah. Great. So I hope people will take some cues from what you've so wisely said. And I got to know facets about you that we had not touched upon in conversations earlier, which is wonderful. I'm glad I did this with you. And
Do we,
I got to
Venu,
know aspects of you that, yeah, sorry.
may I ask a question? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, yeah, please.
Okay, so we have some live viewers and listeners, right?
Right?
Okay, so if you permit me over the next half a minute or so, I can give a quick exercise to anyone who's interested in getting into this craft so they can take home something from this half an hour, 45 minutes we've been together. Is that okay?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay. So anyone who wants to make a career or wants to get into this at the deep end of the voiceover binge, what you need to do is take a small script of about 30 seconds to 1 minute, read it, record it, and that's your file number one. Take a rest of about 2 to 5 minutes, read it again, the same script, 30 seconds to 1 minute, and that's your file number two. Do it again immediately. Don't take any rest. That's file number three. And continue to do it another 4 times, so you'll have 7 files. Simple enough. Record the same script 7 times in a row. After that, go to file number two and just delete without listening to it. That's right. Delete it. Don't listen to it. Do the same for files 3, 4, 5, and 6. So what you're left with is file number 1 and of course file number 7. Now listen to file number 1 first and then listen to file number 7. This is the result of 5, 6 different sections of practice which you had between the two. My dear friend, you
Oh,
yourself will understand what change you need to do to become better in your craft. So you don't need any guru or guide or a certificate course. You can do it yourself. God bless you and all the best. Thanks, Venu.
wonderful, Joseph. I I really wish I, I should have been, insistent in getting you into a studio, because then people would have understood what this actually meant. Anyway, we'll do it again at some point in future. We'll figure this out again, and then we'll do it. Thank you once again for coming on board, and it's been a real pleasure understanding this aspect of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Venu, for having me. God bless.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That was Joseph Thomas. Voiceovers actor was just one of the many facets of this wonderful man. Everything from training to graphology to investing and helping people understand how they can move ahead with the career. The two exercises that he gave, I'm sure, are terrific opportunities for anyone interested in getting into the field to figure out for themselves. And if you have a great voice, well, go ahead and make money off it. Next time, another guest, another episode, another career journey, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Until then, thank you for listening.